Yes, I know there's a new trailer for Ant-Man out right now. I'm not going to do a video for it, but if you really want to know my opinion on it, short answer is I thought it was better than the first one, and now I'm super pumped to see it. Now, let's talk about Thor The Dark World. And again, I already did a review of this movie, so this is a spoiler-filled video. If you want to see my spoiler-free video, the link is in the description below. As you know, Thor The Dark World is the second film that's part of Marvel Phase 2 leading up to the Avengers Age of Ultron, but it is also the second Thor movie. Third movie if you count the first Avengers movie, which features Thor. Now, as I said before, I loved the first Thor movie. It was my favorite standalone Phase 1 movie. And I like how the film opens up with this prologue about the Dark Elves. What happened was the Dark Elves were at war with the other worlds, including the Asgardians, and their leader Malekith, he possesses the Ether. But the Asgardians conquered, and this leads Malekith and the Dark Elves to be banished. And the Asgardians, they hid the Ether somewhere where it can never be found. Then we cut to present day. Loki, he is taken to Asgard and imprisoned for what he did in the Avengers. And I like that they did that. We get to see how Odin and Frigga, they reacted to that. Meanwhile, Thor, he is in other worlds, and he's trying to bring peace to all the 9 realms. And there's also the reconstruction of the Bifrost Bridge, which was destroyed in the first Thor film. And the Asgardians soon learn that the convergence, which allies all the 9 realms, is imminent and it approaches. And in London, where Jane Foster and Darcy travel to an abandoned factory, where it appears to be defying the laws of physics around them, and Jane finds a portal that leads her to another world where the Ether was found. She finds it, and she is exposed and affected by it. Heimdall alerts Thor about this, and so he goes down to Earth where he is reunited with Jane and takes her back to Asgard. Now, I like when they reunite. She's just slapping them around. She's like, "Where were you? I saw you in New York." Which is a fair question because, you know, you were in New York fighting alongside Iron Man and Captain America, and throughout all that, you telling me you couldn't find no time to go spend time with Jane? Now, Malekith, he awakens from his hypersleep when he was banished, and he finds out that the Ether has been exposed, and it is within Jane. Odin tells Jane and Thor about the origin of the Dark Elves. Malekith, he takes one of his men and turns him into the Cursed, and it attacks Asgard, and this leaves Malekith and a couple of his armies into Asgard so that he can find Jane and take the Ether from her. In my original review, I said Thor's mother Frigga, she had more to do in this movie than she did in the first movie. She did. I like that little segment because before she dies, she at least gets to go out with the bang. We see her going head on with Malekith. Watching that scene in theaters, I remember I was like, okay, ma'am, you got it. And Renee Russo, who plays Frigga, I haven't seen her in a lot much lately. But then after seeing her in this movie, and then recently in Nightcrawler, which I loved her in, I guess people saw her in this movie and thought, hey, Renee Russo, she's still around, and she can still kick ass, and she can still act. Let's utilize her. So if this movie led to her being in Nightcrawler somehow, some way, awesome. So therefore, hats off to this movie. Now, more on the characters in this movie. Chris Hemsworth as Thor, I loved him in this movie. This is probably my favorite Thor film. He is not the same Thor that he was in the first movie, and he's more wise, he's more of a leader more in this movie. He's more mature and grown up, and that's what I like to see in characters, is I like to see them mature. Natalie Portman returns as Jane Foster. She was functional in the movie, and she was a lot more helpful at the end of the movie, but her with Thor, I felt like I liked her more in the first Thor movie than this Thor movie. Because the relationship between those two, it was kind of a little one-dimensional. And I hope they improve on this in Thor Ragnarok, which comes out in 2017. There's even a deleted scene on the Blu-ray where Thor, he's celebrating with his friends, and one of them goes, "Tada!" like Thor did in the first movie. And then Thor, he's contemplating doing it, but then he's like, no, I'm better than this. I don't need to do this. He's learned maturity, as Jane taught him from the first movie. Anthony Hopkins returns as Odin, Thor's father in this movie, and you know, he's great in most things, like he is in most things. In this movie, Odin is confidently ready to give Thor the throne of Asgard. Idris Elba, he returns as Heimdall in this movie. Y'all already know how I feel about him in this movie. But like I said in my original review of this movie, they gave him more to do in this movie than he did in the first movie. So I can at least appreciate that. For the Earth characters, Kat Dennings returns as Darcy in the movie, and everybody complained about this movie being too funny because of her. Well, honestly, that's just how Kat Dennings does her humor. If you've seen the movie she's in and the TV shows she's done, you know the kind of humor she brings in. I didn't really find her annoying in this movie, and she brought some great comedy and relief in this movie. Which is another thing. This movie is a lot more funnier than Iron Man 3, and I'm glad they stopped at this movie because Captain America: The Winter Soldier, I felt like it was well balanced, and in Guardians of the Galaxy, it was funny, but it still had its serious moments though. For the comedy, that was the point of Guardians of the Galaxy, but in Thor The Dark World, I felt like they kind of went a little too overboard with the humor in this movie, though. But I still had fun with it, though. Stellan Skarsgård, he returns as Eric Selvig in this movie, and he's gone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs after his brain was taken over by Loki and the Avengers. He's walking around historical artifacts, naked. He's walking around Jane's apartment in his underwear. He's at this mental institution, but that made for a sweet, awesome cameo by Stan Lee, though. Lady Sif and the Warriors 3, they return in this movie. And again, another one of my gripes about this movie is I thought there was going to be like somewhat of a love triangle between Sif, Jane, and Thor. There's a scene in the trailer and in the movie where Jane sees Lady Sif and they both embrace each other. And I thought they was going to do something with that. I really wish they did, but looking back on it now, I'm kind of glad they did because it would have dragged the movie a little too long. Malekith and the Dark Elves, they were functional in the movie, but honestly, Malekith, he's probably my least favorite villain within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and he wasn't really memorable enough, which is a great way to segue into Loki. I'll probably say this before, like this is my favorite movie featuring Loki, because this is him after the events of the Avengers, and he gets imprisoned, and Frigga, she's still there with him until she gets murdered, and so he teams up with Thor to go get his revenge. And so Thor breaks Loki out of prison, which that makes for a cool, awesome cameo by Captain America. I'm telling you, when I saw that scene in theaters, everybody died laughing, including me. And this is also my favorite action sequence because we get to see more of the banter between Thor and Loki. Loki's just giving Thor crap, and then Thor, he's trying to break out of prison while taking care of Jane as well. And even Jane, she slaps Loki for what he did in New York, and that was real funny right there. Thor is speaking to Loki and Joe, he's like, if you betray me, I will kill you. And then all his friends, they keep telling him the same thing. If you betray Thor, I will kill you. If you betray Thor, I will kill you. I just love that because that's just their way of saying they are not playing with Loki. They are tired of his shit. And we also get to see more of the conflict between Thor and Loki. Like Loki here resents Thor from letting his mother get killed. In the events of the Avengers and the first Thor film, it's still between them, but yet they still love each other, but they just won't admit it. And like they're fighting, and then Thor's like, Mother wouldn't want us to fight. And then Loki's just like, well, she wouldn't exactly be shocked. And so they finally get to the Dark World. Thor and Loki, they trick Malekith into taking the ether out of Jane. And even that caught me off guard. And when I saw it in the theaters, I was like, yep, typical Loki. That's something he would do. But they actually tricked Malekith and the audience. And that even caught me off guard. Now, they get the ether out of Jane, but it ultimately comes back together and it assembles onto Malekith. And Malekith escapes with the Aether. And Loki sacrifices himself to save Thor. So Thor and Jane, they find their way to this portal that takes them back to Earth, and they are reunited with Selvig and Darcy. So Thor and the others, they find out that Malekith plans destroy the universe and restoring the Dark Elves' dominance by unleashing the Aether at the center of the convergence. So Thor battles Malekith through various portals. And so Thor battles Malekith through various worlds and portals until one portal separates them. Thor returns in time to help Jane and them to use their science equipment to defeat Malekith. He uses it to transport Malekith to this other world where he is crushed by his ship. And then the film ends with Thor returning to Asgard, where he declines Odin's offer to become the king of Asgard. Now, I like that little scene because we can definitely see that Thor, he has definitely grown up. He said, I'd rather be a good man than a great king, and that he will still protect all the realms. And to me, that makes Thor awesome. Now, as Thor walks out, we see that Odin transforms himself into Loki. Loki isn't dead. And that leaves up a lot of questions for what they can do with Thor Ragnarok. Like, where is Odin? Is he dead or is he still alive? Will Thor ever take the throne of Asgard? Like there's a whole bunch that you can do with Thor Ragnarok, and I can't wait to see what they do with it. And at this point, I definitely can't wait to see Loki in the next film. Now for the two end credit scenes, because again, we get two, just like we did in the Avengers. You see Sif and Volstagg, they visit the Collector, played by Benicio del Toro. They give him the Ether because it is revealed that the Ether is actually an Infinity Stone, and that the Tesseract, it is an Infinity Stone as well, and it's not safe to keep two of them together. And the Collector's like, I'll take good care of it. And then when they leave, he's like, 1 down, 5 more to go. And to me, that sparked my curiosity because it's like, Infinity Stone, wait, what? Now, not my favorite of the end credits scenes, but I liked it enough because it sparked my curiosity about what the Infinity Stones are. And at the time, we had never seen any footage of Guardians of the Galaxy, so this was also like a good glimpse of what we can expect from Guardians of the Galaxy and the tone and the scope and feel of it. And then the second one, which is at the very end, Thor, he's reunited with Jane, and they kiss. And then after that, we see a Bifrost monster got into Earth, and he's just walking around. I like the scene, it was funny, but at the same time, it's like, y'all could have put the first one at the end because people were waiting towards the credits, waiting to see something else that ties into any future movies. In the end, I love Thor The Dark World. It was a great improvement over the first film, though I love the first film. I like this movie more because we got to see a little more of Thor being Thor. The scope of this movie was bigger than the first movie, and that credit goes to Alan Taylor, who directed a couple of episodes of Game of Thrones. So going into this movie, this was just right down his alley. The visual effects of this movie were stunning. And I remember I saw this movie in 3D, and even the 3D was good. And you can definitely spot the differences between the directing styles between Kenneth Branagh and Alan Taylor. But I can't help but look at the visual effects in this movie and not think of Star Wars. Because tell me, you did not watch this movie and ask yourself, is this Disney's Star Wars demo reel? Tell me, look at the scope of Asgard and tell me that does not look anything like something straight out of Naboo. Regardless, I love this movie. We get to see more of Thor being Thor. Loki was great in the movie. All the characters were great. The story was good, even though I felt like it could have been a little improved with a better villain. In fact, if anything, I feel like this movie should have been called Thor and Loki because this movie is really a continuation between the conflict between Thor and Loki. I'm going to do something that y'all probably never see me do. I'm going to change my rating of this movie because back then I gave this movie an A++, but looking back on it now, I'd say, yeah, this movie is about an A+ for full price. Now, I'm not saying this movie sucks. I'm just saying, compared to the first Thor movie, and there were a lot more to improve in this movie than there was in the first Thor movie. And that's it for the day. Did you really like this movie? Tell me in the comment section below. And tell me, who is your favorite villain in all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? You got Loki, you got Malekith, you got Ronan, you got the Winter Soldier, you got Obadiah Stane, Abomination. There's so many villains. Tell me, what's your favorite villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And as always, if you like what you see, subscribe to this channel, subscribe to my other channel. The links are in the description below. And be sure to check me out on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Instagram. Peace.